and Services Committee, beginning at a little after 6 o'clock on Tuesday, June 17th, 2014. Councilmember Schmidt will not be joining us this evening, so there will be 3 of us. Would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Klein. Here. Councilmember Price.
Here.
Councilmember Scharf. Here. Councilmember Schmidt absent. 3 present.
Okay, thank you. Public comment. Are there any members of the public here who would like to speak to items not on the agenda? Thank you. And if you would like to speak to items that are on the agenda, please submit your speaker cards. Thank you. Okay, I'll start with agenda item number 1, recommendations for expansion of city smoking ban in the downtown and California Avenue business districts, including benchmarking data and policy discussion to possibly include additional areas or restrictions on sales and indoor smoking. And I have just to share, I have 2 members of the public who would like to speak to this issue. But why don't we start with the staff presentation?
Hi, my name is Kirsten Struve. I'm with Public Works, Environmental Services, Watershed Protection. I'll be giving the presentation on the expansion of the city's smoking ban. Just for way of background, staff was asked in a colleague's memo from November 2013 to proceed to Policy and Services for policy discussion and recommendation to expand the outdoor smoking ban in downtown and the California Avenue Business District, to conduct outreach to the downtown and California Avenue residents, businesses, and property owners for input on expanding the smoking ordinance, and to benchmark other jurisdictions' outdoor smoking ban ordinances in downtown cores. So we have performed the benchmarking with 8 other cities, including Mountain View, San Rafael, Santa Cruz, Walnut Creek, Monterey, Santa Monica, Berkeley, and Fremont. And the benchmarking showed that other jurisdictions' bans are addressing more than what the colleagues' memo requested. And so we want to bring these ideas to you to consider before we do the outreach. Specifically, staff recommends some of the following options: an expanded area beyond California Avenue and downtown. Fremont and Berkeley restrict smoking in all commercially zoned sidewalks. And so for Palo Alto, we could consider the regional community commercial designation in the comprehensive plan, which would, in addition to downtown and Cal Ave, include Stanford Shopping Center in the town and country, and also the the neighborhood commercial areas, which is the neighborhood shopping centers and areas along El Camino and San Antonio. Also, most of the other bans include all outdoor dining. Our current smoking ordinance still allows it within 50% of outdoor dining, so we would recommend doing all outdoor dining, which is common practice anyway. And then if the council wishes to not go with either of those, looking at the areas where cigarette butts are actually found. So we spoke to the Downtown Streets team and also did some trash and litter surveys and found cigarette butts in areas outside of the area that was recommended in November, so in areas around Ramona and Lytton and at the roundabout near the Cal Ave train station. Which brings us to addressing litter, which is something my group is particularly interested in because cigarette butts are the most common item found at creek cleanups, shown in the picture here. So we would recommend having litter receptacles, even in areas where it's banned, similar to what Walnut Creek and Santa Cruz have done, as in the pictures there. And they could also be serving as signage to let people know that smoking is prohibited in the commercial areas. In addition, several of the cities benchmarked had a specific goal of improving the American Lung Association score. The American Lung Association score is based on outdoor restrictions, indoor restrictions, and restrictions on the sale of tobacco. And so Palo Alto currently has a D with the American Lung Association score. And so looking at indoor restrictions in the future and reducing sales of tobacco is something you may wish to consider. Enforcement, our current ordinance has a fee for a $250 fine, but several of the other jurisdictions have escalating fines, so if they find the same person doing it over and over, it can be escalated. And also they've come up with enforcement plans, maybe like a one-day, kind of like a sobriety checkpoint thing. And then inclusion of e-cigarettes is another issue that is coming more and more to the forefront. The county just included e-cigarettes in their ban, and so that is something we could consider, maybe in a phased fashion, starting with city facilities and pool cars, and then doing additional benchmarking to see how we might want to address e-cigarettes. So in summary, we would like to include in the survey that we plan to distribute online and go to meetings and stakeholders, a broader area than what was originally envisioned beyond California Avenue and downtown, getting public opinion on restricting sales near schools and parks, prohibiting the sale in pharmacies like San Francisco has done, and including e-cigarettes. And the picture actually shows cigarette butts at the Cal Ave roundabout. We have a draft survey, and these are the items that we currently have included in that draft. As a potential future phase, just because it's a bit more controversial and would need more benchmarking, we could consider indoor restrictions, such as multifamily housing, tobacco sales restrictions, including retailer licensing, and then also addressing our recent draft grade of a C from the Santa Clara County Public Health, where the main item also was retailer licensing. So we could include these items in the survey, but it's an option maybe for the future as well. In terms of a timeline, we could produce the survey within a month, advertise it online and through presentations at stakeholder meetings, and solicit input all summer, and then come back with ordinance language to policy and services or the full council as you choose to in the fall of 2014. And just summarizing the recommendations from the staff report, we would like direction on conducting the outreach for the proposed outdoor smoking ordinance options, and a review of these proposed options for both the expanded outdoor and indoor, as well as tobacco sale and e-cigarette ideas. With that, we are open for questions.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, do you have any questions at first, and then I'll go to the public and ask for them to speak? Is that okay? Okay. The first card here is from Trish Mulvey, and followed by Allison Chan.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. There's no question that cigarettes kill people. I've learned a lot recently that cigarette butts kill aquatic wildlife and fish, and that picture of the Cal Avenue roundabout with the cigarette butts, knowing that those are going right into a stored and drain and on out to a creek, is particularly troubling to me. I'd like to say first that I support all the staff recommendations, and I particularly was interested in the benchmarking with the number of cities that do provide receptacles for, or there are receptacles for cigarette butts with the sign saying smoking is prohibited, put it out here. Second request is that you ask staff to look at all the components of the Lung Association's report card, not just with the idea of making our grade better, but with the idea of what would it take and what would it mean to implement the different actions that they're calling for. So when it comes back to you, you have a complete picture of a program that can help the community and our smokers reduce smoking. And lastly, I was particularly impressed with at least one of the benchmark cities is mentioned as coupling what they do from a policy and ordinance standpoint with helping with smoking cessation assistance. I think between having the Palo Alto Medical Foundation and the Stanford University medical resources available to us in this community, as well as county and other resources, that we're well served and have the opportunity to do something really meaningful in that regard. And I hope you'll ask for as broad a survey within reason as you can, so that when staff comes back with a recommendation, you've got as much information as is reasonable to get for you to make your decision. And I really want to thank you in advance for the time and attention you're giving this. I grew up with parents that smoked. My husband stopped on our first wedding anniversary, and that was the very best gift he's ever given me beyond my wedding ring. And I do think that Palo Alto can take on a leadership role here, and I hope you share that idea. Thank you.
Allison Chan.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Allison Chan. I'm here on behalf of Save the Bay and our members and supporters here in Palo Alto and throughout the Bay Area to urge you to move forward with restrictions on outdoor smoking in Palo Alto. I provided a letter of support. Hope you've had a chance to read it. If not, it should be in your inbox. And what I want to highlight is just that pursuing an ordinance by establishing smoke-free commercial zones is a good way to go from our perspective, because when you look at the city's trash generation map, which was produced as a part of the stormwater permit process, you can see that some of the areas, not all, but some of the areas most impacted by litter, of which, you know, a lot of that is cigarette butts, are your downtown and commercial and retail areas. So a zone approach makes sense from that perspective. It also makes sense from an enforcement perspective, as opposed to some other cities that have taken the approach of designating sidewalks as smoke-free and buffer zones, and sort of taking a more piecemeal approach. Having a zone approach is similar to what Walnut Creek recently did, and it just makes it so much clearer that when you're within these bounds, there's just no smoking, whether you're on a sidewalk or at a curb or whatever. So from that perspective, as well as from the litter perspective, we urge you to move forward with that, as well as looking at other restrictions that will address places like bus stops and ATM lines, which are characteristic of more cigarette butt litter as well. And what I want to draw your attention to is an infographic that we've created to start educating our members on this issue, as well as the public. Couple things I just want to highlight as the reason why Save the Bay is so focused on this issue is because cigarette butts are a little bit different from the other types of trash that we've been focused on over the last few years, like plastic bags and styrofoam, in that they're not just plastic, the filter, but they're also toxic, obviously not just to humans, but also to aquatic environments. And one of the statistics listed in that infographic shows a study that was conducted, a laboratory study that shows that a single cigarette butt in a liter of water is enough to kill half of what's living in it. So granted, that's a lab study, and when you extrapolate that to the environment, it's a little different, but it's an indication of the toxicity coming out of these cigarette butts. And when they're being littered at the rate that we estimate, which is 3 billion butts in the Bay Area per year, you start to get a sense of the toxic impact that it's having on our bay and on our and in our waterways. So thank you for considering this. We urge you to move forward with the staff recommendations, and we look forward to working with you to implement a meaningful ordinance to build upon your existing one here in Palo Alto. So thank you for your consideration.
Okay, colleagues, there's a lot of information here, a lot of directions here, and recommendations from the staff. Do you have questions first? Okay, Councilmember Klein.
Well, I like a lot of the report, but I really don't understand why you're suggesting a public opinion survey, or outreach, as you call it. I think we've had, over the years, maybe a half dozen different anti-smoking ordinances, and I don't recall us ever doing any survey work. And so why do we have why is staff proposing survey work here when we haven't in the past, and we do lots of other ordinances without doing any survey work?
We're suggesting it because it was requested in the colleagues memo to do outreach, and we thought that would be a good way to reach a lot of people. And I do believe that Parks did some community meetings before passing their ban. So we could do different types of outreach.
Refresh my memory as to who wrote the colleagues memo?
I did.
Well, I'll ask a question to you. Did you have public survey?
No, I actually think it's not necessary. Sorry. I think it's not necessary, probably.
Please speak into the microphone.
Oh, I think it's not necessary, probably. I think it's not necessary, probably.
I think obviously the colleagues memo was more restricted about expanding this in a couple commercial areas. So I thought, I read the original intent as being just sort of a courtesy outreach to the business association and folks, just letting them know that this was coming more than whatever. I think the fact that obviously as a result of the benchmarking, the factors expanded into some areas that obviously might be more more, I don't want to say more differences of opinion or more impacts potentially than others. I think that's why the staff suggested it. But that was only the staff reading of being responsive to what the colleagues memo thought. You guys are in complete control as to how you would want to direct us.
So I just say, I don't think we need to do that on these items. I think it is intriguing to go forward and say in multifamily housing where there are shared walls and shared ventilation systems, I think there you'd want to do some outreach and get some sense, I think. But I think that's a second step. I think we could do all this now and then start working on that.
Okay. Thank you. Since this is more of a question well, I'll put it out there. While I am, as you will hear later, very supportive of all this, I worry when people on my side put out numbers that I think are really exaggerated. I played around with the 3 billion cigarette butts littered in the Bay Area. It doesn't seem like such an extraordinary number to me. So I'd like to know how it was derived, because if you assume for the moment that, which I don't have to assume it, Palo Alto is roughly 1% of the Bay Area's population. And so our proportionate share of 3 billion would be 30 million a year. And if you divide 30 million and assume that everybody in Palo Alto smokes, including babies, that each person in Palo Alto would have to produce 500 cigarette butts per year. It seems not very logical to me. So I would hope that whoever produced those numbers really has some firmer basis than I can see for it. Maybe you can convey that to whoever produced the number. I don't think we need exaggerated numbers to make our case.
That was, I think the source was Save the Bay as a source on that, and we appreciate your fine-grained analysis. There just must be 1 trillion visitors to the Bay Area.
All of whom smoke.
It's the workers we're going to blame here.
Well, we can find somebody to blame. I'm done questioning.
I guess I wanted to get a little finer understanding. So the recommendations from staff are at the last page of on page 6, right? Where we talk about the input on each survey. We could decide not to do the survey. If we went with numbers 2 and number 3, how quickly could you come back to us with a proposed ordinance? And would you recommend taking the ordinance directly to council, or do you think we should vet it? Or, I mean, how complicated is it? Are there policy issues embedded when you draft the ordinance? That's probably more to the city attorney.
Thank you, Councilmember Scharf. The third item, with respect to adding different types of tobacco products to the existing limitations, is relatively straightforward. expanded indoor smoking and then the potential for expanded outdoor smoking, I think we would need to get some direction from staff in terms of whether those areas are defined sufficiently that, you know, we would be ready to just move that into ordinance language, or whether additional work needs to be done to define, you know, what that scope is.
I think we were envisioning only moving forward with 2 at this time, and then in terms of restricting sales, that would possibly take longer. E-cigarettes for pool cars and city facilities should also be pretty straightforward.
So we could give direction, though, to come back to us. Do this first 2 and 3, right? So you're saying on 3 you were thinking of doing what part later?
Well, this does not include the more detailed indoor smoking restrictions that you were talking about. For example, the multifamily housing.
Right, that's what I was thinking, that's why. But I thought this stuff, everything in these recommendations could be done now,
Yep.
right? So,
Banning.
On page 6.
is there something in 2 that's difficult to do now?
No, I think two is relatively easy, and we could come back probably in September or October with the ordinance, depending on the council schedule and you know what's in the queue. 3, reviewing proposed options for expanded indoor smoking ordinance, tobacco sale, and e-cigarettes. We think the indoor smoking ordinance and tobacco sale would be would need a little bit more time, but e-cigarettes piece is relatively easy, and we could bring that probably back.
Okay, I think there's a little confusion here. There's a recommendation in the PowerPoint and on the first page is more general than the recommendations on page 6 that the council directed us to. So, and I think that the council is speaking to the recommendations on page 6 that have a little more specificity.
Right.
So I didn't see anything on 2 or 3 that would not still be included within our recommendations to the committee. Is that right?
That's right, but it depends on how much outreach we want to do to the pharmacies. And, you know, I know that banning sales in pharmacies can be a little more controversial. It might not be so bad for us because CVS has already committed, and we have several of those, but.
So when you say it's not a legal issue, it's a pushback from them to come complain, right? There's no. So if we did those 3 things immediately, I mean, but not 3 things, 2 things, 2 and 3. Your other question then is, what outreach would we want you to do to pharmacies and that kind of stuff, right? What level of outreach would you anticipate to be appropriate? I mean, there's not that many pharmacies, right? Let them know we're doing this.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we'd want to meet with them and discuss the item with them, let them know that this is coming.
Right. So I'm just trying to figure out, it doesn't seem like that should take that long.
No. I don't think so. I mean, we don't have an unlimited number of pharmacies. Yeah. I would just add, sorry we don't have a copy of it, looking at the American Lung Association ratings of the different Santa Clara County jurisdictions. You know, we had the D rating. Yeah. Everybody else is D or a lot of Fs. The only exceptions are San Jose with a C, Campbell with a B, and the unincorporated county with an A. And the only one of those jurisdictions to date which has reduced or restricted sales in pharmacies is the unincorporated county, which I would guess probably doesn't have a lot of pharmacies in it.
So if we did those first and then we moved on to, how does retailer licensing work? You have to, as a retailer, you have to come to the city and buy a license. Is that it?
We have someone here from the county public health that could answer that question.
Hi, good evening. My name is Nicole Cox, and I'm with the Santa Clara County Public Health Department. And essentially, the way a tobacco retail license works is that any business that sells tobacco would be required to obtain a local permit or license to sell tobacco in the city. So the county has this, the city of San Jose, Campbell, and recently Morgan Hill. And what it does is provides local control to your enforcement agency to enforce sales to minors law and other things that don't really get enforced at the state level. And a lot of the things you're talking about, like the pharmacy restrictions, I think you had talked about sales near schools. A lot of that can actually be done through a local tobacco retail license as well. So it's another option the city might consider to take care of that all in one ordinance. And then if there's any other questions I can answer specifically.
Okay, so in our ordinance, the first one is smoke-free outdoor air. If we did what we talked about doing in those items 2 and 3, would we hit all of those items? I guess that's my first question. And that's on page 4 of the staff report.
I don't actually have a copy of it.
So I can read to you. It says, well, yeah. On page 4 is the items I guess you have. And then our items on what we'd be doing is page 6, which is 2 and 3. And I guess maybe staff knows the answer to that, if we'd be hitting all those smoke-free outdoor air issues.
Can you repeat that question one more time?
Sure. The question is this, is to get your American Lung Association ALA score, they have 3 categories, I guess: smoke-free outdoor air, smoke-free housing, and reducing sales of tobacco products. So I'm hoping that if we do 2 and 3, which are on the recommendations, that we've then covered everything in the smoke-free outdoor air. That's really my first question. If not, what should we add to then cover everything in the smoke-free outdoor air?
We would cover all of outdoor dining. I think what we would need to add is public events, but since they happen either downtown or in parks, that shouldn't be very controversial because it will already be banned. And I think the only other thing would be work sites, which I believe is like construction work sites.
Yeah, and depending on if you have many of those, I think you have a service area restriction already, so some of that could possibly be covered already.
Okay. And then, so that one should be, I mean, I don't see why we can't do that immediately when we do that. Mm-hmm. The reducing sales, I'm not sure if we're going to do the pharmacy, I'm not sure why we wouldn't do all of these. Going with a retailer license, restrict sales near parks and schools, and banning sales in pharmacies. We already restricted in parks. I mean, why not restrict sales near parks and schools? I mean, if we get rid of the pharmacies, I guess it's grocery stores that people buy tobacco and max smoke shop, roughly, right? I mean, and maybe liquor stores, right? And gas stations.
Right. So in terms of grocery stores, if the grocery store has a pharmacy, then it would be banned there as well.
Right. So I guess I'd be in favor of that, and I was just curious if there were any issues in doing that now. And then the restricting the smoking in the smoke-free housing, that I'd like to see. I'm not so sure I want to do that immediately, frankly. Just because I think I'd like to get some input from the residents, but I'd be fine with you guys doing a survey on that, because you talked about doing a survey. I don't know how other people feel. I just wanted to guess, would that be a difficult survey to do? Would it take a long time? Is that more complicated than the other surveys you were thinking of? Any sense of that?
It shouldn't be difficult. I mean, we just need to run a GIS report on all the multi-family units, find their addresses, send it to their HOAs, and put a timetable on it and get it back.
And then
like 30 or 45 days.
Okay.
Sufficient.
And then just for the county health person, sorry, Jim, just 1 second. I just need just 1 second of our time. If we do all those things, do we get an A?
All of the things you just discussed, I would assume, so not having the ALA criteria, but it seems like you'd be covering everything, pretty much everything.
Kirsten, you have it there, don't you? Didn't you do some analyses?
I did. So there's 2 different grading systems, one from the county, where we got a C, and I believe with the tobacco retailer licensing, we would then get an A. And the American Lung Association, if we do all the outdoor things alone, nothing on sales, well, a little bit on the sales, we could get a C, but then if we include indoor, we should be able to hit everything. So Walnut Creek's ordinance, which was sent to you by Save the Bay,
Right.
they moved from a D to an A as a result of their ordinance.
Okay. And Walnut Creek's ordinance, I haven't had time to read it, that includes the multifamily housing and restricting sales, right?
It does.
And what was their experience with that? Do we know?
Yes, it was generally supportive. They did a lot of outreach and community meetings with their different stakeholders. I believe they did 3 meetings, one with their downtown merchants, one with their multifamily, and I think one for residents separately. And they found that it was generally supportive. The residents were, that lived in multifamily and had been affected, seemed to have a louder voice than anyone else, and so they didn't have that much opposition.
Okay, those were my questions.
Okay, thank you. I do have a couple of questions. When you say multifamily housing,
Didn't go in there.
are you including condos and townhouses? Or is this primarily targeting rental housing?
In the 2 cities that we know that recently did this, it is all multifamily.
So all variations of housing
Right,
that's
but-
attached?
But they do it in different ways, so that is something to consider. I'm no expert on, I didn't really do detailed benchmarking on the indoor restrictions, but in one of the cities, when it was owned, they grandfathered in the current owners, and then as soon as it went on sale, it would be non-smoking. And in another city, they just went no more smoking in multifamily.
So it seems to me that the kind of apartment associations, that sort of are regional and sub-regional, I think would be part of your mix, I'm assuming that. Homeowners associations, I'm assuming that, with the townhouse and condos, so that you're making sure that you're reaching the breadth of attached housing. And the other question I have, maybe it's so obvious I shouldn't ask it, Max's Smoke Shop or whatever, and other outlets for tobacco products, this would do what to those retail entities?
If we go with tobacco retailer licensing, they would have to pay for a license and comply with our licensing requirements.
Okay, restricting sales and the licensing. Okay, but the full ban, this is what I'm just trying to clarify, the full ban, the language here is talking pharmacies, including grocery stores with pharmacies. So I'm trying to gauge,
Yeah,
because
so-
I'm a huge defender of this concept, and I recognize it as a major public health issue, but I needed clarification.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert, but what I'm hearing is that it would not include those, and that we would have to start a license for that type of use, and we don't do that at this stage right now at the city level.
Okay.
We would have to probably implement that program. I want to sync it with what we're doing with the business license registry somehow, or at least start to talk to Tommy
To
about
try to
that.
nest some of this
And-
so there's not
correct,
confusion.
Correct.
Right.
So that's how I'm seeing it.
Okay.
But we don't have to do that either. I mean, we would have to create some licensing program.
Okay, great. The other thing is, I had several questions about the report card clarification. That was helpful. The issue of complaint-based process, I know a lot of our enforcement throughout the city, that's the basis. So in the staff report, which was very complete, by the way, thank you very much, there's a discussion here that staff recommends considering inclusion of an escalation of enforcement in the ordinance as well as the development of an enforcement plan. So in the earliest draft here, I don't recall if there is language here related to enforcement and escalation and the development of an enforcement plan. That's kind of a statement and a question. Do we need to include that as part of our motion? Or what are you, where are you on this related to the statement in the staff report?
It hasn't been developed. It's an idea. One of the ideas is you know, we cannot have police do this all the time or being out there 24/7, but it could be like, you know, a one day with outreach around it, like we are serious, you know, just something to show that we're serious about the ban and that people know that there will be enforcement, even if there's not enforcement every single day, but it could happen.
Okay, so you're seeking our guidance on this particular issue because right now you're not addressing the issue of escalation of enforcement, period, the fee structure, and the enforcement plan.
We could bring a draft back when we bring back ordinance language.
Okay. Yes, actually, I think that would be a good idea. I mean, if we're serious about this, we need to go, you know, have every element of this make sense and be connected. Okay, are there other comments or people prepared to make motions or?
Yep.
Okay. Go for it.
All right.
Councilmember Klein.
I have a feeling that Councilmember Sharp will want to add, but I would move that we recommend to the council the items that are listed in paragraphs 2 and 3 of the staff recommendation. And by staff recommendation, I'm talking about the paragraph on page 6 that's titled Summary of Recommendations. And I'm being very specific because we also have recommendations at the top of the page.
Right.
And I'm dealing with the ones that are in the middle to the bottom of the page. And I think we can do all of those. Well, I will stop there for the moment.
I'll second it. And then I'd like to.
Do you want to speak to the motion in the second, or no?
Can I speak?
Yes, please speak to your motion.
Yeah. Well, I do have to sort of confess my personal bias and very much in favor of all these things. My father died at age 57 of colon cancer, which in recent years, and he was a 2-pack or maybe 3-pack a day smoker. And recent studies have shown that in addition to lung cancer being directly traceable to heavy smoking, probably colon cancer is as well, even though that wasn't known at the time of his death. So I guess I'm also a victim of secondhand smoke, since all my recollections of my father was a cigarette in his hand, and I'm sure I breathed as a kid lots of cigarette smoke, which wasn't good for me, so I'm glad I'm still here. So I think we ought to be doing a lot of these things. But I'm not using the American Lung Association, and I have to tell you that I think they're exaggerating. When you give everybody lots of D's and F's, it shows the teacher isn't teaching, or that but we know the teacher is teaching because we have seen a substantial reduction in the amount of people smoking. And the amount of people smoking in Palo Alto, I think actually, that would be my test. How many people in Palo Alto are still smoking? Answer just by walking up and down University Avenue, Cali Ave, and so forth is a pretty small number. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do more, but to say that we're failing in this, I think seems to me sort of a scare tactic, and that usually doesn't work psychologically. But I think our public is very receptive to having all of these changes because I think our society, particularly our society here in Northern California, has moved to where smoking is not acceptable. And I want to mention also that I'm glad to see us include e-cigarettes. We haven't talked about that very much, but I've been reading a fair amount about it, and the cigarette industry likes to claim that this is a way to wean people away from tobacco products. But I think it's more likely, and there are stories this week in the newspapers of the effect that instead of weaning people away, it's a way of getting teenagers hooked so that they will convert to being tobacco consumers as they move into their young adult years. I think all of these things do make a lot of sense for us to do. I am worried about the indoor smoking, excuse me, not in multifamily housing, just because we haven't I don't think the public is there quite yet, and I think that we are going to do some outreach and on that before we figure out just how we're going to handle that. What else? I am a little concerned about when we talk about restricting sales at any establishments adjacent to parks and schools. And think, what do we mean by that? What's adjacent to a park? Just our talking back and forth, we've only found maybe a dozen places or so in town where you can buy cigarettes. So adjacent to a park and a school, 500 feet, 1,000 feet. I don't know what we're talking about there.
How much?
1,000 feet.
So, I mean, that does bring up interesting circumstances. I mean, our Lytton Plaza is a park, and we certainly have some tobacconists within 1,000 feet of that, so.
We can go just.
Good point that yeah, I think we have to be careful when we do this, that we're not in a backdoor way just banning the sale of any tobacco products within the city limits, which, if that's what we want to do, maybe I don't think we can do that. Or can we do that, City Attorney?
I haven't looked specifically at that question, but I would imagine that runs into a preemption problem.
Yeah.
An outright ban.
I think so, that it sounds good, but I think that we have to be very careful as to how we approach that.
All right, speak to my second. I agree with what most of Councilmember Klein said. I do think that e-cigarettes are interesting in that I read today, for instance, that there's 10 new brands coming out. I think they said 10 brands a month. I mean, it was, there's a huge explosion in that area. So I think it's good that we're getting on top of it. So I have a couple of amendments that I wanted to ask you. First of all, I wanted to know if you'd include public events, worksite, and service areas in number 2. I don't think that actually changes that much, but it gets us further along in terms of the ALA.
I'll accept it, except for I don't buy into the reasoning. I don't care what the ALS says.
I understand, but
ALS, I should say.
so I will speak to work sites a little bit. I mean, I do think it's really annoying to see the cigarette butts all over any construction site, and you do see that in terms of wherever they are, and frankly, if they're in neighborhoods, you see them right there on the sidewalk in front of the construction site, and I find that, frankly, quite annoying. And in fact, if oftentimes a construction site, I've had this happen to me, on your single-family home, there was a construction site right on the fence on the other side. They threw the cigarette butts all the way over the yard all the time. So I think banning cigarette smoking on construction sites is a good thing. Then we get to the actual, where was it? Number 2. I thought we should change the language. I don't think it does what you think it does.
Okay.
It says staff recommends these changes to the indoor smoking restrictions and restrictions be considered. I think in number 3 it should be included in the ordinance, not considered.
I agree. That's it.
Okay, so, don't consider it, go do it in terms of those. And you accept that, right? And then I'd like a number 4 where we do the outreach and determine where the community is on the multifamily housing issues.
I have a question. What about the commercial areas? Are you suggesting there not be additional outreach to the Chamber of Commerce, et cetera, et cetera? Because the staff is asking for a little more guidance on outreach. We're really focusing on the smoke-free housing issue now, but do you have any other comments about the outreach?
I don't have a problem. Have we done any outreach at all on this or not?
Yeah, we have. Tommy spoke to all the different business areas within town and just had informal conversations with them. it's all generally been very positive and supportive.
Knowing that we're talking about expanding what we were looking at, okay.
Yes,
thanks.
because I mean, that's what I want to make sure we've at least done.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we've at least talked to everyone and given them a heads up, and it's transparent, and they know it's happening, and, I mean, I wouldn't want anyone to be surprised by any of this.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, Councilmember Sharf, we could do more. You know, we haven't sent a flyer to every business or made sure everybody knows. They've been very informal conversations.
So I'd like to see us proceed with coming up with a plan for looking like we're going to put the multifamily housing.
I want to have a little dialogue with you on that.
Right.
To me, there's a big distinction between condos and rentals.
Okay.
And are you making that distinction or not?
I will make that distinction, that we move forward with rental housing and not condos then. We do rental housing first, we can see how that goes, and always come back and deal with condos.
I'm not sure I agree with that. We're treating different groups of people differently there. They all have attached housing circumstances, and they all have issues of, you know, smoke in the ventilation, smoke moving through the system, et cetera. I'm not sure that's appropriate to make that distinction. I have a feeling I'm outvoted, but that's
You may
my
not be
view.
outvoted.
I don't know. That's my view.
You may not be outvoted. Well, let's start with where we are. Why don't we come back to that issue? Because I'm actually
back.
where you are, to be honest.
Oh well, good.
I was willing
Yay.
to make the distinction because I want to get this, and I'd prefer we be unanimous, frankly, because I figure we can always come back and see that, but and I'm not.
Okay.
I mean, I think the important thing is, you know, condos, frankly, but I'm happy to do, would you be happy to do the outreach and find out how the condos feel about it too?
Yes, some condo association, sure, but the condo associations can do it on their own.
Yes, but
That's true, they can.
I think it makes sense to really intensify the outreach efforts for multifamily in all these categories to get a better understanding of where people are. The points I made earlier, I still believe are the case, that you know, we have to be very careful. It's almost as if, you know, this group of individuals will be under these sets of rules and guidelines, and these others will not. So, but at this point, this is really related to the outreach efforts, is it not? The concept of smoke-free housing is something we're interested in pursuing. We do agree with that.
I do. If I had the ability, I would ban smoking, period. But
Me too.
The distinction that you're making, I think, doesn't wash, because if you want to treat all housing the same, then you ought to include single-family residences as well.
Well, the difference, I think, is not that we could all, is that if it's attached and it gets in the ventilation system, is people who are not smoking are subject to secondhand smoke. And that's the issue, whether or not you live in a condo or whether or not you live in an
I
apartment.
understand that, but it's
And
not,
I think that's the issue.
well, the issue also is, at what point is your home your castle?
As long as it doesn't interfere with the person next to you, I suppose. I mean, we do have noise ordinances, especially, you know.
Noise ordinances apply to single-family homes, too.
Right, oh, they do. But that's because the noise affects the person next to you.
I think we're wandering a bit here.
I don't know if we are. Okay, so I guess I gotta come back to.
Your amendment or addition?
Yeah, so where are we in the outreach, I guess is the question. Do we agree that we're gonna do outreach and putting this in place without a distinction of condos and things, but it comes back to us, and at that point, we can have that discussion after we see the results of the outreach?
I would much prefer us to focus our energies on rental. You guys want to outvote me, you can outvote me.
Okay,
Okay,
I'll make the amendment that we outvote them.
All right. Okay, go for it.
So I'll make the amendment that we do a full
Why don't
outreach.
we do it the other way around, so I can vote no on.
So I got an idea. Why don't we do what we all agree on? Have that approved, and then we can make
Right.
other amendments.
Right.
I think that's probably better.
Okay, fine. I do want to keep moving along. Yes, okay.
So, let's see, what else did we leave out? I needed to,
So we've included outreach to rentals,
that's correct. Include outreach to rentals.
multifamily rentals.
Outreach to multifamily rentals. I'd like to include not necessarily restricting sales, parks, and schools, because you actually sold me on the issue, is that there's a broader issue there. But I would like to see the licensing. Can we include that?
I'm not going to include licensing. Licensing sounds good. I don't think we need another bureaucracy. I think that you got to figure out, that's why I talked earlier about what's the level of our problem now? Why would we go to the extent of setting up a bureaucracy for just a handful of retail outlets? We already know who they are. And by the way, we do have, the police do, once or twice a year, do check sales of tobacco products to minors. So it's not just on a complaint basis.
Maybe staff could quickly address the advantages of licensing, and if there is none, be straightforward. I just say there is none, and it's, you know, I mean, I'm assuming the advantage of licensing is you can pull the license and then they can no longer sell tobacco if they sell to minors within, you know, X number of times, or you could figure something else like that, right? I mean, I assume that's the reason you do it.
That would be the main reason. I mean, obviously, it's an easier, presumably easier enforcement mechanism than whatever, catching somebody in the act, you know. I mean, you're getting complaints that they're selling to minors and stuff. You'd probably easier to have a procedure to, you know, take their license.
So does anyone know what happens now if we say we catch someone 3 times selling to minors and we don't have a licensing? Do we just fine them, right? I assumed, or can we say you can no longer sell tobacco products? Do we know the answer to that?
Other cities?
The only thing that happens is a pretty minimal fine.
That's what I figured. So the licensing allows you to then not allow them to sell.
Correct.
So they become much more serious about not selling to minors.
Exactly.
So I don't know if that convinces you, Councilmember Klein. Okay, so we'll put that aside. I'll make that in the motion as well. And yeah, I think those what I wanted to address at this point. And after we, I guess, vote on Councilmember Klein's motion, I think I'd like to come back and have the other things and see if you agree.
Okay. The other item that we haven't addressed is the issue of escalation of enforcement and the development of an enforcement plan. That is not outlined in these recommendations.
It does, actually, in number 2.
In 2?
It says include penalty escalation for repeat offenders.
Ah, okay. And what about the development of an enforcement plan? Or is that's obvious that will happen? Do we need to state it?
I think it's obvious.
Obvious, okay. And the other thing to consider is, do we want to say, or the next time we see this, the idea of distributing information or have a link on our website which makes reference to smoking cessation programs? So not just the enforcement piece, but within that enforcement plan, or in the enforcement activity would include referrals to smoking cessation plans or programs.
I think if you just wanted us to set up a kind of clearinghouse connection on the city's website, that's something that we could pretty easily do.
Okay, I do think it's important. I really appreciated the recommendation. It's important to not only go by the, the enforcement piece, but then give people positive, opportunities to change behaviors and improve their health and those of everyone around them. Okay, so.
I currently enforce the no riding the bikes on sidewalks personally, and so I would be glad to be deputized to also do a little bit on the street while I'm out too.
Okay, so did you want to?
Should we vote on Councilmember Klein's motion? No? Do we need to restate what it is, or is it
It's 2 and 3 with the language changes that you suggested with regard to taking out the words "be considered."
Yeah, go ahead.
You got to turn it on. You just turned it off. Sorry.
I thought it wasn't loud enough. It's items 2 and 3 with changing the language in 3 to,
Want me to repeat
this,
it?
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
So I said, restrictions of sale of tobacco products and e-cigarettes be included in the ordinance, to
Yeah.
take out the words "be considered."
Be included.
We would make those changes in number 2 and 3, correct?
Yes,
Or
yes.
just number 2?
Yeah.
Or just-
No,
Both
both
2
of
and
them.
3 is
Oh, yeah, 2
change
and 3.
considered
Right,
to
right.
include.
Go away with "be considered." That's right,
Right.
2 and 3.
And we agreed that there'd be a 4 to direct staff to conduct appropriate outreach with regard to potential bans on smoking in multifamily residential units,
Correct. That would be a number 4.
multifamily rental residential units.
Yeah.
I was going to say, hey, that solves that problem.
Right, but he didn't let it go.
And I'm thinking about it, I'll go along with the licensing as well. Though with some reservations.
And then you also agreed to public events, work sites.
Oh, yeah, work
and
sites,
service
yeah,
areas.
yeah.
That's to be added to number 3.
Let's, what's the last one?
Service areas.
What is service area?
You want to just explain what service area so I get it right? I think I know, but.
I think we have service areas already.
Or do we already
Where?
have service areas?
I think we have service areas already.
You mean it's already in our existing ordinance?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, might as well tell us what it is that we've got in our ordinance. Service areas. Do you know what a service area is? I don't.
While we're looking that up, with regards to the issue of the parks and schools, did you want us to leave that in there, or did you want us to pull parks?
Thank you for bringing that up again. I thought we agreed that we would stop the word for it at pharmacies.
Right, I thought we did too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
At
that.
pharmacies, it's e-cigarettes
Okay.
at pharmacy.
So stop at
Stop
e-pharmacy.
it there.
Okay.
I have a question.
To emphasize what staff did say, CVS has announced that they're not selling tobacco products anymore anyway after a certain date that comes up pretty soon. So that's like half the pharmacies in town right off the bat. So we've won at least half of that battle right now.
I have a question on that, the issue of parks and schools. This is pretty standard language for, many activities that are, marijuana dispensaries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why would we not include clarify for me your thinking? Why would we take restricting sales near parks and schools out?
Because we have a lot of other restrictions, and if you leave it in, you're going to ban tobacco products from Max Smoke Shop.
I see, because of the Lytton.
And I think that covers it.
We found the definition of service locations. It means those enclosed or unenclosed areas open to, used by, or accessible to the general public that are listed, such as, buses, trains, taxi shelters.
Slow down and speed up. Sorry.
You want me to start over?
Be the Kel train station.
Yeah, taxis, buses, buses, trains.
Bus, train, and taxi shelters,
Got
for
it.
example.
Fine.
Got
Okay.
it. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Should we vote?
Okay, all in favor of the motion? Aye. All opposed? Okay, 3 in favor, 1 absent. No one opposed? I have a sidebar question quickly. In your research, do you have any notion what happens at Stanford University regarding this topic? Students spill into Palo Alto and live in Palo Alto.
What's the language about?
They do have a smoking restriction. It's 30 feet from any opening, but not the entire campus. But they do not sell tobacco at all on campus.
30 feet from any opening, but once they're beyond that, they can do what they want as it relates to
They
smoking?
can smoke in open spaces, yes.
Okay, and I think from the, thank you, Department of Public Health, did you have a comment on that?
I was just gonna echo that, and I lost my train of thought. I think they were, oh, and they're also included in our county regulations. So I know that the medical campus is smoke-free entirely, but the rest of the campus is not. And then they also don't allow smoking in the outdoor dining areas and those kinds of similar things that you guys are discussing.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're done with this item.
I'm waiting. Do you want to make the condo?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought, yes, the language we have now is rental. I think we should not make the distinction and just make it multifamily and include condominiums, townhouses, and rental multifamily.
With the shared ventilation.
With shared ventilation, shared walls, you know, attached
Well, not just
housing.
shared walls.
It's attached housing where they're sharing ventilation systems and they can pollute one another.
Okay, so you're good with shared ventilation? 'Cause
Yes.
That's the key issue.
Yes.
I'll support that. So I guess we have to vote on that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay.
Passes 2-1.
Passes. It passes 2-1 with one member absent.
So I have one other amendment.
Did staff get the latest? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, council member
Which just came to me.
Scharf.
I would like us to vote to ask Stanford University to become a smoke-free campus, as a lot of campuses throughout the country have done.
And they are not a smoke-free campus right
They
now?
are not.
Okay.
And I would like that the Palo Alto City Council passes a resolution asking them to do so. I guess I have. Oh, so he's, I'm sorry, Larry, I forgot completely. So Larry can't
Well,
vote.
go Bears, I'm in favor of that, and then we'll go and talk to UC Berkeley and have them do the same thing.
So that passes at 2. No, it doesn't pass. It doesn't pass?
No,
We don't have a
don't have a
quorum.
quorum.
So I
We'll
just,
come back to this.
I just ask that we come back to that, maybe even to full council if necessary, but we just come back to it. That was interesting.
Maybe we can talk about San Jose State, Santa Clara.
All right.
Great addition.
So just before you leave, just so we're clear, you gave us explicit direction as it related to outreach on apartments and condos with shared, rental apartments and condos with shared ventilation. That would be a prelude to us, obviously, even having a recommendation from the committee as to what you would want us to do. Separate from that, though, you asked that we also make sure we do the appropriate courteous outreach to the different affected businesses and Stanford Shopping Center and that sort of thing. My sense would be that it would be appropriate for us to initiate that now before this item comes back to the council. Because it's, you know, it would be just information that would be useful to the council, even though the council as a whole hasn't acted on this, okay? And then we would be bringing this back to the council. Presumably, when do you think we could come back, given what this motion is? Yeah, I mean, the
October.
fall?
Yeah, October.
Why that long?
Just looking at the council calendar.
No, I mean, the only thing we're waiting for would be the outreach issues, right?
Right, no, and I think the city manager and the, mayor should
Yeah.
decide when, what date it actually is, but you guys should have it, when can you have it ready is the question.
Right. So, I mean, I think let's even see whether we could get enough outreach done effectively over the summer to come back before the fall, okay?
Yeah, this goes back to my first question. The outreach here, I think, is just really polite and being, it's not saying, are we going to do this or not? We've done, I mean, it's sort of strange to be at this end when we started enacting anti-smoking ordinances 40 years ago now. I mean, I can remember when the owners of the restaurant said, oh my God, no smoking in restaurants, we'll lose all of our customers, da-da-da-da-da. Well, lots of people coming down to the city council chambers and really protesting. We were going to cause the end of the restaurant business in Palo Alto. Then we were going to put the movie theaters out of business because people could, up until then, could smoke in movie theaters. And when the movie theaters had ran, instead of, in addition to the inevitable trailers before the movies and so forth, they go tell your city council that they're ruining the movie experience. So we're not looking for a duplication of that type of fight. I think that that's sort of over with, and it's not like industry has a veto over this.
Okay, well, I'll try to bring this back as soon as we can after the come back from recess. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Congratulations. Thank you.
I'm really offended by the American London tactics.
Well, you can see it. No one's here. There's no one here saying.
No.
The only person that's complaining is the sheriff. The entire city.
She smokes like a proverbial furnace.
She's the only one.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 2, discussion and recommendation to council regarding potential ordinance making changes to council compensation. And I just wanted to note that at places, I asked the city clerk's office to give us copies of a council report from the city of Mountain View, and they're proposing specific ballot language regarding compensation. This, again, ballot language, $1,200 per month, and adjusted annual adjustment CPI. So that is at your places for your information. Okay, if we could have a staff report or just a quick summary.
Good evening, Chair Price, committee members, City Attorney Molly Stump. The committee will recall that this is the item that the committee had asked to retain with respect to the potential council seat matters that have been taken up in recent months. You'll recall that the charter allows council to be compensated consistent with the general law, and implementing that charter provision is an ordinance providing that council members will be compensated at $600 per month. The general law does allow some room for that compensation level to be increased by an ordinance that could be adopted by council by a simple majority. Council also does have the ability to place an ordinance before the voters if it wished to do that. We are here this evening to present some supplemental survey work that was done by the Human Resources Department to fill out some of the questions that the committee had last time about what's been done in other jurisdictions. Just one further procedural point, any change in council compensation has to go into effect with the beginning of new council terms, and for Palo Alto that would be January of 2015. So any ordinance that would be adopted between now and the end of the year would not result in a change in compensation until January of 2015. I think Megan Cassis from the HR department will...
Can I just ask a question on that?
Councilmember Sharp.
Council members, for instance, Berman and Burt, and Schmidt are, not up for being reelected, right? So they actually can vote on the ordinance and have it apply to them for next year. Is that how it works? I always thought you couldn't have it apply to yourself during your term, and it had to be in start of a new term. But no.
At least one member of the body has to have stood for election in order for the new compensation level to apply to all members of the body. So it's not individual to a particular seat. It's not just the seats that are newly elected. As long as some new council members are elected, then the compensation can go into effect for all council members.
Good evening, I'm Megan Cassis. I'm with People Strategy and Operations, and I'll be presenting the data survey that we collected for surrounding cities. So as Molly stated, the purpose was to gather data from surrounding cities in Santa Clara and San Mateo counties, and we were looking for 2 data points, the monthly council salary amount, and then also whether there was a pending ballot measure. We surveyed, in addition to cities in Santa Clara and San Mateo counties, also the Northern California cities from the Management and Professional Compensation Study. So the methodology was PSO contacted
each city either through their city clerk's office or the human resources department. And as I mentioned previously, we collected the 2 data points, the monthly salary amount and whether there was a proposed ballot measure. We surveyed a total of 37 cities, and the list is on the slide. And then the bar graph shows the results, and if you can see, Palo Alto is highlighted sort of in the middle area, currently at $600 a month for council salaries. So the highest monthly salary is the city of San Jose with $6,750 per month. The lowest monthly salary is $0. The average monthly salary, $759.40. So at $600 per month, Palo Alto currently falls $159.40 below the average monthly salary. There have been 3 recent changes in the cities that we surveyed. The city of Campbell recently effected a 5% increase, and that will go into effect January of 2015. The current monthly salary is $619.90, and it was increased to $650.90 a month. The town of Colma recently increased council monthly salaries in November of 2013 to $924 per month. And the city of Santa Clara, the council receives an annual CPI increase. There are 2 cities that have discussed increasing monthly council salaries and either declined to take action or have either declined an increase or have failed to take action so far. The city of PAP&SC has discussed a council increase, but no action has been taken at this point. And the city of San Jose's Salary Setting Commission recommended an increase for council monthly salaries in 2012, but council declined an increase at that time. The city of Mountain View has a proposed ballot measure where voters will consider increasing council salaries from $600 a month to $1,000 a month. Thank you.
So I have a bunch of questions.
Yes, Councilmember Sharp.
So it would have been helpful to have that at places, frankly, because there was some useful information.
Apologize about that.
What did you say the average salary was?
700.
So, what was it?
The average monthly salary is $759.40.
So that's not the average of the chart in 2B, is it?
Yes.
So we have all these cities that have 0?
Yes.
And so you included the zeros?
Correct.
And then you included like San Jose?
Correct.
So, and San Jose pays them, I don't know, it looks to me like, what is it, $80,000-$90,000 a year?
Yes, and I
85,000?
believe that's because council members serve full-time in the city of San Jose.
Right. So I guess you've answered my question, and I guess I would say that it doesn't seem that it's that helpful, the whole average idea. I mean, frankly, when I look at this chart, it seems to me that people are all over the map. That's my fault. I mean, we have a number of cities where it's 0, and we have the city of Belmont at $390. We have Brisbane at $150, Burlingame at $590, and then we have, a small town like Colma at $924, which seems, fairly high.
I got a lot of that.
I didn't know they paid taxes. Then we have City of Cupertino at $730.
Look at Sunnyvale, 31,000.
Right, and Sunnyvale's at 31,000. I guess average doesn't, given when you have such disparate numbers, I'm not sure what useful information average gives us, frankly. I guess that's my point. And is Santa Clara on here? What does Santa Clara pay? Oh, there it is, I found it. So they're they're like 811. Okay.
Oh, yeah, right.
Okay. Oh, yeah, talking about that. That is a very helpful slide, but you guys must think we're 20 years old up here.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't read that. And
Well,
while I'm on this, I hate to pick on the city attorney's office. But really, look at that small type you guys use compared to the city manager's office. The city manager's office uses big type because they know we can't read.
Greg, you want to know the lawyers use small type.
That's what I'm figuring. I'm figuring you have to use the fine print.
Well, obviously, there's a big range here in what the size of the jurisdiction is and the pay, but going to your point about the average, I mean, I'm not exactly counting these, but $600 looks to be about at the median of where we are. I mean, it's pretty
Right.
much in the middle of
And
the
that's
pack.
where we are.
Right.
And I guess that's sort of where I was going with that, is I don't really think we're an outlier at $600, but I sort of wanted to get that. And I guess what I'm hearing from is that it's really the city council's choice. It's a policy choice of what we get paid. Okay, that's all the questions I had.
Councilmember Klein?
I have no questions, but I have a motion whenever you're ready.
I have a couple of questions. Thank you for the surveys. I concur with the comments made about the outliers, knocking them out. The other thing, too, is that, and some of the materials in the staff report were very good. I mean, size of the city, complexity of the issues, number of times council members meet, hours served, average monthly basis, weekly basis. I mean, these are the kinds of things that I think are really relevant to the discussion, not just a pure numbers issue. And I think anyone knows that when we're looking at this comprehensively. And I know it's in here, I did read it at one point here. If we were to adjust from City Attorney Stump, when you first made comments, if we were to do an annual adjustment, what are we entitled to per current, I don't know, what are the parameters now that we could do by ordinance? And I know I read it here, but if you could just restate it.
Yes, thank you, Chair Price. So the general law allows the council to add 5% each year since the date of the last increase, which was in 2001. The 5% cannot be compounding, so it's not 5% and then calculated again on the next year and again on the next year.
Okay, so in the staff report, it comes to, I believe, a little over $1,000? A little under?
990.
A little under, nine something something?
And then you could have a prospective 5%. I mean, you could.
Right. If it were,
forward, right.
according to the parameters and what you're discussing, it could go to 999. I don't have the...
So I guess I would like to just note for the committee that if the committee is interested in the maximum amount of increase, we would need to actually look at the calendar and count days from the date that the 2001 increase went into effect to January 1 of 2015, and we might add or subtract another 5% there. So that number could move just a little bit.
But
we would
that's,
want
we're
that
talking
direction from the
ballpark.
committee. Yes, that's correct. Ballpark is the number that you have there before you.
Okay, great,
It's
thank
not
you.
permissible under state law to create a system of automatic escalating increases into the future. So you would need to pass an ordinance with the increase that you thought was appropriate for now, and if the council was interested in a future increase, you'd need to take it up at that time and pass another ordinance.
Right, as opposed to going the charter route, which allows you different flexibility. Okay, thank you. We have one speaker from the public, Herb Barra.
Thank you, Chair Price, and good evening, committee members. I want to thank you for asking for and for the clerk providing the Mountain View staff report that includes within it a summary of the state general law, government code, section 6516D, that indicates that in determining the salary increase, essentially you set aside other forms of compensation in determining what the increase is. The choice of whether how that other compensation not to begin with is a policy choice of the council and the voters. You will note also in the same, attached to that report is a list of various cities in the county, and the city of Santa Clara council members are not eligible for medical benefits. Last night, Vice Mayor Niss took a poll of seeing how many council members had other employment, and over the years that's varied. We go back nearly 50 years when Enid Pearson and Byron Scher were elected. The concern of the Palo Alto Times was that we were electing people who didn't work in Palo Alto, not that they didn't work, but essentially for a period of time we had people were employed and didn't have a problem of both being employed and serving on the council. For some cities, it really is a full-time job, such as San Jose, which each district is bigger than the city, it's by district, and each district is bigger than the city of Palo Alto. The real variation in compensation is not between jurisdictions, it's between council members. Last year, Vice Mayor Niss's medical benefits were $900.62, and chair prices were $24,717.79. In fact, for the majority of the council members, the medical benefits were more than the salary, and that's before taking into the fact that the salary is taxed and the medical benefits are not. From my point of view, I would believe it would be better to do what Santa Clara does, and that is that the only compensation the city council members receive is the salary. We are not a city like San Jose or San Francisco where this is a full-time job. That's a choice of council members whether they want to be employed or not be employed when they're serving on the council. In fact, with something like medical benefits, it's also a choice of where you receive your medical benefits based upon which of the two employments has a better cash out. And I would think that while the law permits you to raise the salaries by a certain amount, I believe with the fact that the council is busy placing things on the ballot to raise more money and trying to cut back on employee expenses, it would be better for the council or the voters to decide that council compensation should be limited to the salary, and that it would be more amenable to the public for you increasing your salary if that other compensation is removed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Councilmember Scharf, and then.
So I wanted to remind colleagues that this is an interesting thing. Back in 2010, when I first got on the council, I don't know if you recall, there was actually a motion to reduce council salaries by,
I remember that.
Like 20% or something like that, and it actually only failed on a 5-4 vote. The city now is doing a lot better financially, and I don't want to go on a rant on this, but I think it's really important in a symbolic way. One of the things that cities do is when times are a little tough, people stop giving raises, and then as soon as times are good, everyone ramps up salaries and takes on these long-term obligations and does those kind of things. And as we as the city council, I think we need to show some leadership on that. And because times are good, doesn't mean that we should suddenly have our hand out and say, let's go ahead and raise council salaries on that. I mean, what that chart showed me, and where I was going, is that we're right in the middle, which is perfectly fine with me. And that's where I think we should be. And yeah, Mr. Borick makes a good argument as well. It's not really just the $600. It is the health insurance. And the other thing we've done in Palo Alto is we've moved to look at total compensation, and we've asked our employees to look at total compensation. And if we as council members don't look at total compensation and say the same thing, I don't think we're being, I don't know what the word is, being transparent and, keeping faith and all of that. So I don't really see any pressing need to raise the salaries. I did want to comment briefly on what Mr. Boric said as well in terms of council members not working. I think that was a little misleading when they did that poll. The question was who works full-time. So I want to say I definitely work, practice law. I know Councilmember Klein works and practices law. I was viewing it as, if practicing law can be a 60-hour-a-week job as full-time. Maybe it's 40. I probably spend, 30 hours a week on work outside of council. Probably, 40 or 50 hours on council. But I think that's a choice, as people said. I mean, I think you can, my first year on council, I think I was spending, I'd say I spent 50, 60 hours on my law practice. I think I did the same the second year of council. So I do think you can work full-time and have this job on council. It just depends on how much time you want to put into it. So what I'd like to know is what is a compelling argument of why we need to raise council salaries to actually get there.
Councilmember Klein, and boy, I have comments on this.
Well, I will move that we recommend to the council that salaries be increased to $1,000 a month effective January 1, 2017.
Second.
And I'm glad to respond to Councilmember Scharf. The reason that we should increase the salaries is that they have not been increased for 13 years. So they're less than they were in terms of inflation. And we are seeing a decline in the number of people who are in their middle years applying or seeking to run for the council. That doesn't mean that there won't be some, but that was, I think, quite clearly the purpose of Vice Mayor Nissa's poll as to how many people work full-time. And because she compared it to the 90s when she was on the council previously, and everybody on the council at that time worked full-time because the workload for the council was less. And I want people to be able to run who say, well, gee, I'm not running to get rich being on the city council, and however you cut it, nobody is. But I do want to have enough money to pay for babysitters or childcare or whatever else may be coming up that people have to give up to be able to serve the minimum amount of time to be a good council member, which I think is probably 25 or 30 hours a week, and people can certainly spend a lot more. And I think that we don't want to say that's choice. I think that's demeaning, actually, because I think those choices are actually very, very beneficial to the community. So that's why, to me, we ought to increase the salaries. And I suggested that it be January 1, 2017 for a couple of reasons. One, and the prime one, is so that nobody presently on the council will benefit from that increase unless he or she is reelected. So voters can make their choices if they will, if they don't like the increase by doing that. It also, if there's people out there who don't think there should be an increase, they can take the initiative and get the necessary signatures and put it on a charter change on the ballot prior to January 2017. So it seems to me that we're consulting the public and they'll have their say, and that nobody is really, if he or she votes for this, would be having a conflict of interest, however you want to define that. And I know it's not a legal conflict by any stretch of the imagination, but sometimes people's perceptions get a little strange on that. And I do want to add that this is, I think, a democratic move. A number of years ago, I had the opportunity to be in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and invited by a member of the Colorado Springs City Council to sit in on one of their meetings. And quite by chance, one of the items was on the agenda was for them to start paying their city council. Colorado Springs at that time was the largest city in America that did not pay their city council members. And one young woman said, just I borrowed her words, saying, I just wanted to have enough, I want to run for city council, but I want to have enough pay so that I can pay my childcare expenses. And some much older woman who was dripping in jewelry and fancy clothes said, oh, no, this should just be a great service to the community, and you shouldn't have, you should be glad that you're being honored and thus not take any money. And I think that was very sort of aristocratic, or looking down on those people who may not have as much money as the wealthier ones. And I do want to keep our council open to as broad a group as we can.
Okay, I'm going to I seconded that. I feel very strongly about this issue for many of the same reasons Councilmember Klein has pointed out. You look at the seated council right now, we come from a variety of economic situations, and if people are interested in serving, some may or may not have work circumstances that allow it. Maybe a slightly larger stipend would help someone make this kind of choice to commit the hours required to do this job well. Just to clarify, there are also members of the council who choose not to be compensated, and that's a personal choice. And there are council members who choose not to use the health benefits, and that's me that beginning this year. In the past I did, but I do not at this point. And also I did work full-time until 2 years ago. So, you know, I represent the kind of council member that sort of reflects different sets of circumstances, work, balancing it with the council duties, et cetera. I also think the nature of the work here does require a significant time, attention, developing expertise, and I think it is important to at least make it somewhat possible for people who may have fewer means to consider trying to do this work and to earn a living at the same time. And for some people, this change in stipend may be part of the answer, recognizing that every person sitting here is not sitting here because of the compensation and the overall package. So I think it's very important to do this, and I want to thank Councilmember Jean McCowan, who made the original proposal many years ago, I believe, in the early 200s, whenever that was, 2003. She did. I believe she was the last council member who stepped forward and said, let's make an adjustment to the compensation. So that's my second, and I'm very much in favor of this.
Time to vote.
Okay. All in favor of the motion? Aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
All right. 2 in favor. 2 in favor, 1 opposed, 1 absent. And how soon could this come forward to us at the City Council?
2016.
I would like to be here when it comes forward to us before December. So this will come forward to us, what, next week?
No, next week I'll be here, but.
No, it will not go into packet tomorrow morning.
But
Thank you.
do we think,
I'm thinking
we'll talk,
January,
early
February.
fall? I would love it to be here before the middle of December if we could.
Oh, we'll have it back, yeah.
There's no reason it can't come back in August.
Right. Okay. Good, okay.
Is there a next meeting day?
All right, I think it's pretty straightforward. Okay, meeting adjourned.
All right, good job.